24-25 internal audit have provided reasonable assurance. I also set out key information obtained from our external auditors and things that they've picked up that we could do better in relation to governance. So I carry that forward in part 4 of the draft annual governance statement, where I set out significant governance issues for the Council of the Isles of Scilly, and the significant governance issue picked up during 24-25 is the ongoing piece of work, which is the review and update of key policies and procedures for the council. So in that section in part 4, I set out that where we were at close of business at the end of 25, what work needed to still be undertaken, and I also set out in that section planned work during 25-26. This draft annual governance statement went before the Council's Governance Committee on the 17th of June, and just 2 updates since that meeting. One issue highlighted by Councillor Marcus at the Governance Committee was that some of the work that the Council has already done in terms of updating its policies wasn't reflected on the Council's website. That has now been updated, and those policies are updated on the Council's website. I've also updated some of, in section 4, some of the additional policies that have been worked on, some of which are before council today. So there are 2 recommendations before members. The first is that excuse me, following consideration of the 24-25 draft annual governance statement set out at Appendix 1 of your report, it be approved as draft to enable the draft to be published for the period of public inspection alongside the Council's statement of accounts. And recommendation 2, that following the period of public inspection and external audit, the draft annual governance statement be brought back to full council via the Governance Committee for consideration in final form, so it may be approved as part of the Council's statement of accounts to be signed by the Chief Executive and Chairman on behalf of the Council. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Leah. Councillor Sims, please.
Yeah, I'm happy to propose the recommendations. Essentially, this is what we should be doing, and it all seems pretty sensible to me. And we seem to have an external audit and internal audit basically saying we broadly are doing what we should be doing properly. And they have mentioned a couple of things, but to an extent that could well be to justify their existence. I think that overall, I think it's really quite very happy to propose both recommendations.
Thank you very much. Councillor Grottick.
Happy to second, Chair.
Thank you. All those in favour, please. That's carried. Thank you very much. Thank you, Leah, for your work.
Thank you.
Item 10 on our agenda is the 4th quarter financial performance report in the hands of our Chief Executive and 15 Officer, Russell. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Evening, members. Here today we got the 4th quarter financial performance report for the 2024-25 financial year. I'll just go into the revenue budget monitoring position as a starter. You'll see that in the 4th quarter, our actual overspend for the year rose to £985,000, which is a significant overspend and something that is very serious, and we need to take it seriously. The increase over the quarter 3 has predominantly been down to a technical change in accounting. So I think the first thing to say is that the Q2, going back to quarter 2, we were already forecasting an £805,000 overspend. Apart from that one technical adjustment, we're pretty much, our forecast is pretty much bang on for the final end of the year. So we have financial control. We know what we're spending. We know where we're spending it. We're just spending too much in two areas, and those two areas were primarily children's services and adult services. Children's services, we're very aware of that situation. We're on an improvement journey, improvement plan. There's not a council in the country that who've been on improvement journeys through Ofsted improvement notices who don't create a serious spending pressure on the council, and that usually has to be drawn down from reserves. So although we would prefer not to have, it's not a surprise. The overspend in adults is slightly more worrying because it is just keeping the service ticking over as normal. So there's no improvement work. It's just that is the cost of keeping that service safe, statutorily safe, and it's particularly around the staffing in the care home, where due to the inability to recruit people from the islands to work in the care home, significant sums are now spent on agency staff coming in. You cannot run a care home on the islands with agency staff in the medium term. We do need to find a different solution very quickly. We are running down our reserves, and I think that is one of the big worries I have with my what I want to on as chief executive is the sustainability of the council if we continue to spend that level of money on adult social care. Children's services, we have put an uplift in the budget going into the new year. There is also a likely additional improvement money coming from the DFE over the next couple of months. That will help bring children's services back within budget. I'm hopeful that will bring us back very close to budget or within budget. For adults, we are continuing to spend significant sums just in keeping the care home operational, and that is where where the worry is. You'll see that we have had a number of other savings in other services. There are a few overspends and a few underspends, but generally, we're declaring overspend of £985,000. Actually, children and adults added up to over 1.4 million. So the rest of the council, if it wasn't for those two, we would actually be underspending. Significant part of the underspend would be the contingency, which was in part held because we knew of the impending work needed on children's services, and we've managed to accrue additional income due to holding significant sums of money on grants for the museum project, which has helped offset our overspend in total. But as I say, it is worrying if we cannot get adults back in line very quickly. We will be entering into a position where the council is going to have to make some very difficult decisions. As I say, the overspend is set there. You can see that the variations would have been very close. The red bars on the chart on page 72 of your pack shows that our forecasting and knowing where we are financially is not the issue. We are actually just spending too much to keep the care home operational at the moment compared with the budget. I'll just mention quickly the technical change for members who might be wondering what that was. We were accounting and recording and reporting to you the spend on the Mosaic system, but we were treating it as capital expenditure. It is the cost of setting up the Mosaic system. If you own the system as an asset, you can capitalize the costs of the setup. If you're renting the system as a cloud system, you are not. That is the change. The argument we put was that we've entered a 5-year contract for Mosaic. We should be able to amortize the setup costs over 5 years. Our external auditors disagreed, and we've had to treat it as revenue, unfortunately. But we did try to help alleviate the situation by getting that capitalized. The additional funding of that increase in the overspend will come from the general fund reserve, and that's set out there. That brings our general fund reserve level down to a level which is getting very close to the level that I would find awkward if we were going forward, and challenged by the external auditors. It is getting quite close to what I'd call the red line of where we don't want our general fund reserve to drop below. So again, putting us into a less solid financial position going forward than we have been in the last couple of years. Probably the only other one to touch on is, say, the reserves are set there. You can see they have dropped on page 73 of your pack. And say we need to at least stop any use of any more reserves for the time being. And I think we will probably get a recommendation from the auditors that we should have a plan to start replenishing reserves. So that means reducing what we're spending and putting money back into reserves in our next 3-year plan. And that will become more difficult because I think we'll be struggling to balance the budget in the next couple of years. Government's announcement and what Robert mentioned earlier will help to a certain extent, but there's less money allocated in the system for local government going forward than is probably needed. So although we may maintain our share when others may lose, it won't be going up at the speed our spending is going up. Just one mention on the airport, pretty a reasonable position on the airport in comparison to previous years, although we have still had a shortfall of passengers against our target, which did help create an overspend. The rest, only part was due to passengers, but some was due to increased costs of staff turnover due to having to train more firefighters than we normally would during the year. But I think one of the things on the airport that we're grappling with is that our no-fly days in the summer are becoming more and more. In the winter, we have no-fly days. We might have 2 or 3 flights, which will have less than 50% occupancy, and the number of lost income is relatively minor. In the summer, we're losing a whole day's flight in June, where it would be full, and we'd have a whole day of activity, so we're probably losing 15, 16, 17 flights a day, all of them full. That is starting to have an impact. As I say, we've always had weather disruption, but it's mainly been in the past down to winter weather. Now we're seeing the summer disruption. That's having an impact on the finances going forward. We will be bringing the airport review with a proposal of how we address some of these to you in July. Savings, I'm not going to mention. The other thing, if I move quickly onto the capital programme on page 77 of your pack, you'll see that in terms of capital expenditure, we were only spent 65% of what we were forecasting we were going to spend last quarter. And predominantly that is down to the forecast on the Museum and Culture Centre, where the expenditure was less than anticipated due to we not getting the main contract in place and the main contract expenditure started. So there has been a slight slippage against the forecast. Obviously that will accelerate in the new year, but it does mean that predominantly that dragged the spend down to 65%. If it wasn't for that one project, the remaining part of the expenditure is pretty much on line with the forecasts. As I say, the Culture Centre is then mentioned again in page 78. Council tax collection, if I move to now page 78 into 79, council tax collection held up pretty well during the year, but we did just dip under at the end of the year. Our actual performance dipped to 96.45 for the year, compared to the target of 97.15, so a slight drop in collecting council tax. Equates to about £16,000. That's performance of collection. Overall, I think our total council tax receipts were not far off what we anticipated, because the collection is only one element. It was actually slightly more collected in total because there was less discounts given because of changes in circumstances. But it does say that show that perhaps the cost of living crisis is beginning. We always feel that there's a delay in the southwest between the cost of living crisis type things hitting, and that's probably further exacerbated for the islands. So we might be just starting to see a little bit of that coming, so it needs careful monitoring in the new year. Business rate collections, again, slightly under the target for the year, but again, predominantly the total amount collected is not going to give us a major issue going forward. But again, we do need to make sure that we do keep an eye on collection of taxes, and ensure that we don't allow too much bad debt to build up. Moving on, water rates. We've still got it on there. We're still chipping away a little bit at a time. Most of the debt is now being written off as and when we get to a position of chasing down the amounts that are owed, which are now 5 to 6 years old. We're getting to the point where we will be writing that off. But I think at the moment we will still chip away in case we can collect just a little bit more. But it won't be long until we write that off because we will be time expired on most of it in the next year or so. Housing, we got arrears in housing on our performance. It is, we're below what we set ourselves as a target. It has improved in the last quarter, quite an increase in the last quarter in terms of a better performance, but we're still at a level that we need to worry. It is slightly worrying that we're building up slight arrears in housing rent. So you take that along with council tax. And you're just beginning to think, is there pressure on people paying their bills, paying their council tax, paying their rent? And something we need to just bear in mind because obviously it has an adverse effect on the council's bottom line. And the sundry debt position, you'll see that we've had a significant improvement. A balance overdue of over 300,000 in quarters 2 and 3 has now come down to 130,000 due to action taken against one of the organisations that owed a significant sum, which has now brought them back within terms and brought our overall total down. So that's looking good. Invoice payment, you'll see that generally we're paying most of our local SMEs in 14 days. Our target is to pay 75% of SMEs in 14 days. We are achieving that most of the time, if not all the time. We're not quite so good on paying them the residual within 95% and all suppliers within 92%. Quite generally, we seem to be stuck at about the 88, 89% on a constant position there. A lot of that is down to getting purchase orders out at the most appropriate time to allow invoices to be paid on time when they come back in. If the purchase orders aren't raised on time or are not to the right amount, then that causes a delay in payment. If purchase orders are in there and are matched off electronically with the invoices, then payment will always be made in time. And the Treasury strategy indicators are there. I'm not going to go through them, but they represent the statutory indicators that we should report on a quarterly basis to members and basically set out our levels of borrowing, how under borrowed we are against our capital financing requirements, and the movement in the capital financing, and whether we're under or above the liability benchmark which the government have set. Generally, our borrowing, we are still massively under borrowed in terms of we should have borrowed a lot more money. We've managed to use cash reserves to offset that. We will at some point have to borrow that money because we've spent it. We've invested it in the capital programme. We've just been able to use our own cash to delay the actual taking of long-term borrowing. But we are getting to the point where in the next 12 months, I think long-term borrowing will be needed. We're just going to have to ensure that we maximise our position with the markets as they are at the moment. Thank you very much. Is the end of the report.
Thank you very much, Russell. We've obviously been discussing the adult care cost on previous occasions. I was led to understand that we were looking as though we might have some hope on the horizon in terms of new recruitment that would actually alleviate the agency costs, but that doesn't seem to have happened. Clearly, we have to have a plan. We can't just blindly carry on spending the money that we've got because we haven't got it. So where do we go from here? Do we need to have a workshop with members or some form of brainstorming to try and work out how we're going to continue with the care home and how we're going to fund it?
I'll come back first, and then I expect the lead member for adults will probably want to say something. We have in the last 2 weeks undertaken a number of recruitment events on St Mary's. We are hopeful that will lead to some recruitment, even if it's only 1 or 2. That will help alleviate it. We have been working with legal representation on getting our license to be able to use international recruitment as a way of also helping alleviate the issue. That has taken much longer than we anticipated. It's quite a minefield to go through. We've had to get expert legal advice on the final completion of the documentation. Hopefully we will get that within the next 4 weeks. I'm hopeful we'll get that license. That license isn't to bring people in from foreign crimes, which the government are clamping down on anyway. But there is already a very large cohort of foreign international workers in the UK. But you can only employ them if you have a sponsor license issued by the Home Office. And getting one of those sponsor licenses, we did fill an application in last October, November. It went and went to the Home Office. They sat on it for, they didn't exactly deal with it quickly, which we were advised they don't deal with things as fast as you expect. And when they did deal with it, they returned it and said they wanted further information and they didn't grant us a license. So that's when we've taken legal advice to reapply, and they say hopefully that will then give us that license and that we can have access to that market of labour in the UK. And that will help offset it. There's no guarantee that we will get those people wanting to come to work on Scilly, but it does open up that access, which is a very large part of the care industry, is those international workers that are already here in the UK. Most of the care homes in the UK use international recruitment to source most of their labour these days.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Mumford, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Good evening, everybody. Yes, I think it's the delay in the international recruitment has been a bit upsetting, really, and also the government they're going to stop any more coming in. So let's hope that comes through soon. We've been here before, and we don't want another meeting like we had before when we were told that we would have to close the home, especially with the new integrated health hub being done. So I think if everybody could put their thinking caps on, maybe we could save some money by using some of children's services staff to do some of our work. No, Anne's shaking her head at me. But we spent an awful lot on children's services, and we must remember that our adults are just as vulnerable and just as important. And I think we really need to do something about this almost immediately, somehow. We do not want to close Park House.
Thank you very much. Councillor Peacock, please.
Sorry. Yeah, I'll echo what Councillor Mumford's saying, but I think we need to be mega transparent with the community from this point on, because I would be extremely concerned if I had a resident, or a relation of mine in that home, and we are sort of bandying words around in this chamber, and we're talking about closures. So
could I just come in a minute? We're not talking about closing. That's not even on the table. What I'm saying, and I think everybody else would agree in this room, is that we need to find a way to manage this situation. That is not meaning closing the care home. I just want to get that quite clear.
But I'm just following on what Councillor Mumford was saying when she was saying we don't want to be back in that position. So I'm just requesting from the council that we are extremely transparent on this particular issue. please, and update the community at regular intervals as to where we are, please.
Thank you. Anne?
Thank you very much, Chair. I think it might just be quite helpful because I've been working with our head of HR around some of the recruitment recently, around a number of vacancies that we've got across the People Directorate. We had some really great conversations when we had some engagement sessions, both just a couple of weeks ago, both on the Tuesday and on the Thursday. And there is something around helping our community to understand that they're part of the solution here. And it's a great place to work, Park House. We hear lots of stories about some really lovely care of the elderly that are fun to work with, as well as just really wise, actually. So there is something about the way in which we talk about this to be able to help our community step forward and take up some really great jobs that have really good conditions attached to them. Our first attempts were in the beginning of a proper recruitment campaign, and we watched the space to see whether we can have any applications. We're really keen to really progress with apprenticeships and a whole range of approaches to staffing what is a really precious resource for us. So I just wouldn't want people to be, I hear the worry, it's not sustainable financially, but we have to think a little bit differently in terms of being able to do that. I'm really pleased with the results we've had in applications for some of the children's jobs. They are very different skill base to working in a older people's care home in an integrated care and health environment than they are to children's services. But I feel really hopeful with the right kind of approach that actually we have to help people to see. We've got about 6 vacancies. It's not that much in terms of the number of people that really care about older people in this community. So if anybody listening to this is interested, then we're really open to a conversation, and we'll continue with our engagement sessions both on St Mary's and a bit wider.
Thank you very much. Councillor Williams.
Yeah, I was pleased to hear what Anne said. I think there's a risk sometimes of when we talk about adult social care, we just gravitate to Park House in the very first instance. There's a whole spectrum of services that are available to the community before Park House is even part of it. So I think the community hearing this will rightly be concerned, as members are. So I think as members, you suggested having a workshop. I think in the first instance, that's probably the right thing to do, and that's what the community would expect us to hopefully do. I hear the comments about transparency, but I think if we have a workshop first and address it in a wider, holistic fashion. Russell said we need solutions. I'm pretty sure if the solution was easy, it would have been found by now. So we do have to think creatively, but I think if we send a message out that as a council, we will have a workshop with relevant staff as soon as possible and be transparent in some of the outcomes and conclusions from that, I think it's probably the best we can hope for at this juncture.
Thank you very much. Councillor Sims, please.
On the same topic, really. I completely agree that the community will be very concerned about this, but the community aren't concerned enough about it to want to work in adult social care. This is the problem. 10, 15 years ago, we didn't have an issue with in local employment for adult social care. So that the reason, when now we have a situation where we have, well, we very much have full employment over here, and it seems to be that working in adult social care fails to compete with other sectors of the local economy, and that's what we have to address. I don't know quite how we do that, but we have to make it more welcoming and obviously a more welcoming environment for people to work in adult social care, because the solution really to this is ultimately to get back to a situation we had not that long ago where the bulk of the staff in adult social care were local, and we. It's fine getting people in from all over the world is perhaps a bit of a palliative. It may get us a short-term issue, but then you end up with the housing issues and etc. like that. So a big focus on trying to making it more attractive for locals to work there, even if there's some sort of local weighting to put it up a bit, because you could put quite a lot of local weighting on it and still compensate for agency costs, below agency costs and the additional accommodation costs. I think that was basically it on that one. Lots of
Thank
others
you.
though.
Thank you. Councillor Guy, please.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Just a couple of things for Russell, really. The water debt, the housing debt. You glossed over it, Russell, a little bit, and you said it's worrying. In the document, it says it's a serious issue. What assurances are we going to get on this sort of collection? Is there something in the process that we can have a bit more of this collection so we're more aware of it? I mean, writing off debts here. There's housing changes coming on soon. It's just worrying, isn't it? So is there any assurance, please?
Yes. So in terms of housing rent arrears, we have a list now of all those who are in arrears. There is no particular pattern. They're all individual stories. Some people are not contactable anymore. So we're going to have to go through that list again to send letters out. We've got, if you remember, members approved a new system where we could send legal letters out to try and claim those debts. So we are working on the recovery of those debts. It takes time, it's difficult, and everyone's got a different story. And of course, in a cost of living crisis, putting a payment plan in place, you put one in place, then they get more debt and then you need to do another payment plan. So payment plans are being put in place for those who we can contact, but it's an ongoing issue and it may get worse before it gets better as part of the cost of living crisis. But we have the list, we're working on that list, we're working with those tenants and ex-tenants to try and recover those rents.
Thank you. Councillor Dean, please.
Oh, yeah, just a bit of optimism for the adult social care staffing situation. I mean, we passed plans for Park House at the last full council meeting, which is addressing this very problem. One thing I would say, and I haven't mentioned this before, but I'll say it in this meeting as well, is we very often bring people over to the islands and offer them accommodation that they pay for at General Fund Housing. I think we should start looking at offering that same accommodation to people who live on the islands, where who are probably in, uncomfortable accommodation, for want of a better way of putting it. It makes the job more attractive as well. Just a thought.
Thank you very much for that. Chief Executive.
Yeah, I just wanted to come in on the discussion on the adult care staff. I mean, obviously, we're doing everything we can to recruit an island. I think a workshop would be good. I just wonder also whether we're just starting to see the impact of the demographics now on the islands of the number of people on the islands. The population is shrinking. The number of people of working age is reducing. Are we just starting to see that making it difficult for us to deliver services? I'm sure businesses will say the same. They're struggling. We do know some of the hospitality businesses now bring people in from the mainland to help service the hotels, etc. in the summer. It does seem that I wonder if that cohort of people that we can actually target is now on a reduction, and it's something I think is probably slightly more serious than just adult care as well on that basis.
Thank you. Councillor Grosset, please.
Thank you, Chair. I totally agree with the comment from the interim director that the staff are the most precious resource, and I'd just like, I'm sure it's being done already, to check that, for example, when we had the issues last time, we actually formed a small staff focus group to come up with ideas, and they came up with some very good ideas about more family-friendly rotas and one or two other ideas that did make a material difference. So I'm sure it's being done, but just to say, anything the members can do to support the staff, obviously we will.
Thank you. Nicola, did you want to come back?
Yes, just really about the integrated care hub, really, because I think we've got a window of opportunity next month when we open the doors to the new hospital site for people and the public to come and have a look at that new facility. And what we're seeing there is that the health sector are finding it a more attractive place to work and an easier place to recruit to. And we can use that as an opportunity to start showing what's happening up there. The new modular build for the care home provides a great opportunity to work in a fantastic environment in a great place. So I think there's a real sales pitch to build on there and make sure we make the most of that opportunity for the public to visit that site as soon as possible.
Thank you very much for that. Very helpful. Councillor Williams.
Yeah, I agree with the Chief Exec's comments on demographics. I think it is it is becoming more and more apparent, which again puts an emphasis on us as a council, I believe, to make it even more attractive for children, young people and families to see Scilly as a place they can create homes, build homes and create a sustainable future for. So anything we can do as a council to make that process more straightforward, I think has to be something we need to pursue.
Thank you. Councillor Sims, please.
Well, anyway, I was going to reiterate what Russell said, but you know, when we talk about transport issues and all the other issues here, we certainly, myself and Robert, are very happy to say that it's becoming increasingly unaffordable for people to live here. Well, this is the council is hitting council income now because it's unaffordable. You know, the reason the people are not paying debts and rent, etc., is because they can't pay. I'm sure they would if they could, but they find it unaffordable. So it's, you know, it's the councils now getting it as well as the general economy.
Thank you. Councillor Peacock.
If I just may move things on a little bit in the document, quickly on the airport, I note that I think I sat here last year and we spoke about this, and we had again a variance in the negative with a number of Skybus flights coming into here. I know the airport's up for review, so I'm not quite sure of the timelines for that, but I wonder whether when we start doing financial planning very soon for next year, because it's not that far away, whether we actually we look at the last few years and actually put a factor in of maybe 10% on the actual proposed figures from Skybus, because they always seem to be higher than the reality.
I can assure you the Chief Executive is already doing that, Councillor Peacock. He's learnt from that one, and the review is coming next month. Councillor White, please.
Yes, thanks. Thank you, Chair. Sorry to take the conversation back a step, but I think what we're looking at is a series, as others have touched on, is a series of interconnected issues. People aren't able to find suitable accommodation. The cost of living, the cost of transport is going up. They've moved to the mainland. Our population decreases. Then we're struggling to fill these essential roles. So I know all of those things are issues that are on all of our minds and that we're going to be working on. But I think with regards particularly to adult social care and filling those roles, I think we need to keep banging that drum about the benefits, about the local waiting, and doing what we can to show that it's not just a job, these are careers, there's places people can go with these. And again, potentially if there is housing attached, that might make it more attractive to people who are struggling in other areas as well.
Thank you very much. You've still got your light on, Councillor Sims.
I wanted to come back on the airport.
Okay, well, do you want to do that then?
Yeah, sure. Just I completely agree with John. I mean, I think I've been saying for quite a long time that we absolutely need to adjust the figures. Don't take, and then particularly don't put too much weight on the operators said. And I'm still of the opinion that if we could work the situation where we charge a fixed price for the airport, then the operators will be a lot more rigorous in what they expect and what their projections is going to be, as opposed to just because it doesn't actually affect them. They could go 15,000, 20,000 over. It doesn't make any difference to them if they get told. But if they're paying a fixed amount, they've got to be much more rigorous about what they do, and then we're not going to end up with disparity. We'll end with this disparity, not depravity, but works both ways really. And we won't get this gap that we've had for years and years and years now, and I just think it's something that we definitely need to address.
Thank you. Anne, you wanted to come in, I think.
I'm very minded, Chair, that we're yo-yoing with the subject, so I trust you'll forgive me for just interjecting a little bit about adult services. Just to say that absolutely, as the covering director at the moment, I'll take away the idea of a workshop and really welcome the suggestion around staff. What was your word? Focus groups, thank you. But I guess I just was wanting to make it clear, given we know that the island's listening to full council, and just that, you know, from my point of view, having covered the service for the last 5 weeks, I've met some incredible members of staff who work in Park House. We had a fun time in our recruitment event, and I was grateful to members who came along to say hello on the day. We have some superstars who work in Park House, and we know that our staff are often the best recruiters of other people to come along. So I just really formally wanted to put that out there in terms of covering at the moment. And watch the space, because we'll be doing a lot more events in the coming few weeks.
Okay, thank you very much. So we go back to our financial performance report. We have two recommendations.
Sorry, Robert, I've been
Sorry.
a nuisance here. I had one more question. I had a long list of them. It's just regarding Mosaic. Now, our actual absolute numbers will be in a batchingly small percentage of what Plymouth has got or Birmingham has got in terms of clients, if you like. But I'm assuming that we're actually paying considerably more per capita for Mosaic because of the actual, because you're buying that package and the support and everything. So, you know, we may be like social care, you may be looking at 30, 40 people, but we're paying the equivalent of like 10,000 people for a big authority. I'm just assuming that it's disproportionately expensive for us than it would be for a larger authority.
Yeah, I mean, we need a case management system for both children's and adult services. And you're right, you know, there's a lot of money spent in the setup costs. You would spend that when you're setting up for having, you know, 500 clients on the system or cases that you monitor, whether you have 50,000. So there is that element. You know, the cost of setup is similar when you do these things, and the cost of the system, although your licenses are based on ranges, etc. Again, we're always, and this isn't just Mosaic. We have the same problem with our planning systems, our environmental health systems. We are paying, you know, proportionally, we are paying much higher than anybody else in the country for these systems, because we don't use them for very many cases, but we still have to have that core system in place.
Thank you. Anne, you wanted to come back?
The only thing I would add to that is in other places you end up with multiple systems, and one of the ways that we've implemented Mosaic is for all age and all areas of intervention with people. So in other areas, you have a different system for recording things like family support and some of the really big initiatives that are coming in next year around the care reforms. We'll cover that in another time in full council, but I think it's also really important that for members to understand that we are absolutely maxing a Mosaic to its best use, so that we don't end up having to bring in another system in a different recording way. So it's quite innovative, some of the work that we're doing at the moment, which other authorities will be a bit envious of.
Well, the other point I was basically making, I don't ask another question, is that the council could be really, really super efficient. I think we are quite an efficient body, but unfortunately we're at the thick end of a very unpleasant wedge in lots of occasions. So that was the point I wanted to make.
Okay, thank you. So could I come back to the recommendations, please? Could I have a proposer for their adoption? Councillor Peacock, seconded Councillor Sims. All those in favour? It's carried. Thank you very much indeed. And thank you, Russell, for your report, albeit not particularly good news. We move on now to item 11 on our agenda, which is the Council Performance Summary and Corporate Risk Register for Q4 as well, which is also in your hands, Russell. Thank you.
Yeah, alongside the finance report for that period, you'll see the non-financial performance report here, setting out the indicators that we agreed on for the performance, to manage the performance for the year. You now see that the Q4 data is in there. The risk register is also attached. You'll notice that albeit some of the risks may not have changed, the commentary may have changed or may not have changed, and the scores may or may not have changed, but all those risks have been reviewed in the quarter by the risk owner. So again, it is our latest position on the risks that affect this council, and the data is being reviewed on a quarterly basis and is in this report pack for you. I'll leave my presentation at that and take questions either I can answer on performance, or hopefully my directors who are here can. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any questions for Russell, please? Councillor Blackwell.
Thank you. So on page 119, financial and economic stability. For the sake of clarity, what has or is going to be, is the funding going to be used for, and how much was it? This was the Department for Levelling Up allocation.
Thank you. Just
at the
pulling it
bottom of
up.
the page.
119, I think.
It's just at the bottom, the work with the Isle of Wight and DULHC.
Oh, the work with the Isle of Wight.
That's right, yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yes, we worked with the Isle of Wight in 23, and then in the 24-25 settlement, there was a small uplift for island weighting of 150,000 in the RSG, which went into our general bottom line that funded services and the budget pressures across the whole council. It wasn't anything for a specific service or a specific item. It was just included in our general settlement.
General settlement. And how much was that for, please?
150,000.
150.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Williams, please.
Yeah, not a great deal to say. PDP statistics seem pretty poor and low to me.
Which one, Lee?
Page 101, we're talking some departments, 22% of staff have had their PDP, if I'm reading that correctly, which doesn't sound very impressive, is perhaps right. We picked up on health and safety previously, although the numbers have dropped, which is encouraging. They still seem few more health and safety concerns than necessary. And then I was just going to pick up yesterday, Councillor Grottick and myself had a good couple of hours talking about data. It was a challenging hour and a half of my life. I think it was really just trying to break the culture of all the different partners who are working on children's improvement and just trying to make the point that because we are so small, because we are so different, we should be able to do things a bit better and different to the rest of the country. And that sort of was struggling to land, I sort of felt. But for me, the point was statistics are really nothing without a bit of narrative. Is that we were talking about that, so what? Who cares? Where's the outcome? Where's the impact? Where's the difference? And I still think in our documents here, we could still do a little bit better. We talk about sort of services for adults and what's going on in the active civilian. And there sounds some really good stuff, but I don't really know as a councillor what difference that's making to the community. And you could say that about different bits of it as well. So I'd just like a little bit more time and thought to be given to the narrative, because I think there's some really good stuff going on, but it just doesn't seem to come out as clearly as I'd like.
Thank you very much. Councillor Sims, please.
Yeah, referring back to page 119, as Councillor Blackwell just did, I think that the paragraph there about financial and economic sustainability, we should put that on our webpage because it sums up the problems we've got absolutely. And I think and having it tucked away right in the middle of quite a large report is I suppose it's not okay. It's not in a useful place. I just think that's fundamentally the issue we have is in that paragraph, and I think we should put it out there a little bit.
Thank you, Chief Executive. Do you want to come back? Councillor Peacock, please.
Yeah, looking at page 111, which is housing, I just wondered where we are with Live West currently, because I see it has reduced now from risk of 12 down to risk of 8, but it's still in the kind of amber colour. And I just wonder, because Live West, we've been talking about it for a while, and I'm walking by now, and I live on St Mary's, and there doesn't seem to be much, if anything, happening yet.
Okay, so Live West have planning permission. They have now been out to tender for contract award for the build. Their intention is to start on site spring, summer next year. The big issue really is getting Homes England funding. So I have been up to London to see the Housing Minister to lobby for funding for the site. And so we will continue to have our conversations with Homes England. They accept that the funding package will have to come outside of their normal parameters for value for money reasons. But there is good progress and good conversations going on at both civil servant level and ministerial level about the need for a special case for the islands, and in particular to get this site away. So hopefully they can award the tender They've got 2 bids. The price is coming at around about 100% higher than what they would expect on the mainland.
Right, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Blackwell, please.
Thank you. Also on page 131, corporate estate, it refers to a temporary solution for the sports hall roof. The recent sports hall roof contract for 280,000 was, I think that's just recently been completed. Is that temporary, or is that the long-term replacement? And how long is it expected to last, please?
So the specification of that work was that it must have a warranty for 25 years. Those works are now complete, and we await the warranty, but they won't get it until we won't get it until we've made the final payment.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we have 3 recommendations on this report. Could I have a proposer, please? Councillor Blackwell, the seconder. Councillor White, all those in favour? It's carried. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you, Russell, for your report. Moving swiftly on, item 12 on our agenda is the housings allocation policy. A report from Nicola. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. I've also got Rachel on screen in case we have any questions that I can't answer, and I'm sure there will be some. So I've brought Rachel back from maternity leave for a special evening event, so she joins us on screen tonight. So this is the review of the house allocations policy. We had a policy that dates back to 2012, and obviously there's been a number of changes since then, both regulatory and on island. So the policy does need updating. There is a high demand for housing, obviously, and it's an emotive issue. So we need to make sure that the policy is transparent, and we have gone through an effective community engagement process. We held a number of workshops with members throughout 2023 and 24 to look in detail at the policy. I would say that was an in-depth workshops that went on for many hours, and we looked at every single element of both the eligibility, prioritisation and transfer process. The outcome was that we then took a document to council on the 17th of September for approval to go out to public consultation. And that public consultation started in November for 12 weeks and took us through to February. So a summary of the responses set out Appendix G, and there's a whole range of appendices. So you've probably had fun trying to make sense of it. But basically, there's 2 elements to the allocations policy. One is, can you join the register? Put it in simple terms. Another one is, once you're on the register, who gets priority? And in simple terms, that's what the 2 documents are. So you've got an existing document around the eligibility to join the register, and we've got the existing policy, Appendix A, the consultation document, Appendix B, and the final proposal, Appendix C. And I'll take you through the assessment of those now. I'm not going to go through each and every question, because I'm going to keep it at a level that looks at where we had contentious issues or where there wasn't a public consensus on it. And I think the one we've just touched on actually in relation to Park House is question 2, which is about a proposed change that would allow those who need to be on island for their employment to join the register without having fulfilled the 2-year qualifying criteria that we have at the moment. So that was the rationale for that, was to help improve the opportunity for working age people to come and live and work on the islands. It also helps us to record the real housing need, so that we can, when we go in for funding with Homes England, instead of saying we've got 70 odd people on the housing register, we've got a proper record of people in need, and it helps us build our case. So the consultation, we did have 51% in favour of that change, and the recommendation says that we accept this proposed change. It's quite different to what other places have, but it does reflect the need to try to reverse the population decline that we have on island at the moment, and also to increase our working age population, to encourage young people to come and stay. You know, we've all had anecdotal evidence of people coming to stay summer season, really keen to stay on, young people, bring up a family here, but they can't get housing. They can't even join the housing register. So that's one of the key changes that were proposed, and that's reflected in question 2. On balance, we're recommending approval that change would be implemented. I think the other element of the consultation looked at who shouldn't join the register, and actually that proved a little more contentious. So on question 8, we proposed changes to allow those with land or property on the mainland to join the register, because at the moment you can't. But there was a pretty negative feedback to that response in response to that, and also the feedback from the stakeholders, the other housing associations said that's a no-go for them in terms of their charitable status. So the recommendation is not to make that change. And what you're starting to see here as we've gone through the consultation, we're starting to make the changes as a result of that consultation, and it was intentionally controversial. Those workshops were meant to promote discussion, and we weren't expecting every recommendation to go through. So then that took us on to question 12, where we were prepared to relax the exclusion of people joining the register for those who had unacceptable behaviours. And there was a really strong response to that, in that consultation was you mustn't let people with unacceptable behaviours join the register. So the recommendation is not to accept that proposed change either. So that's the eligibility and ineligibility, if you like. And then there's quite a lot in the consultation feedback around prioritisation of who goes where on that register, what points do you get awarded. And in question 12, there's strong feedback against removing prioritisation for family-related priorities. So having suggested we should take that off as a priority because it duplicates elsewhere, it remains in. So people would still get points in relation to family-related priorities. So question 20 was another area of contention. We sought to give prioritisation to foster carers. This did not get community support, but it's seen as a barrier to attracting more foster carers on the island. So despite that feedback from the public being not in support, we are still recommending to you that change be made and that foster carers do be given prioritisation within the allocations policy. So we've gone against the public consultation there, but for good reason, and there's a rationale to it. On question 22, proposed removal of priority based on tenure. And this was a bit of a mixed one because there's so much to this tenure ask. It was about feedback, looking at the feedback, people were saying generally if somebody's getting to the age, an older age, and they're still living at home with their parents or they're in shared accommodation, when's the age where you should get a bit more of prioritisation? So we looked at national evidence about what's the average age of people leaving shared accommodation or moving into owner occupation. And national evidence has suggested that for those aged 28 or over, you wouldn't really be expecting to be in shared accommodation anymore, regardless of tenure, whether that's at home or in a private rental. So there's a suggestion that we'd make a change to the policy to enable people over the age of 28 still living in shared accommodation to get additional points to allow them to be prioritised within the system. The final question on prioritisation that I want to discuss is the time held on the register. This is another emotive one because currently you get points for the amount of time you have spent on the register. But social housing isn't about how long you've been on the register, it's about whether you're in housing need. So time spent on the register does not reflect housing need. It's the other factors that reflect housing need. But as a compromise, I think it's reasonable to suggest that we could remove it as a prioritisation, but in the event of two applicants having the same points at the end of an allocation process, the one that's been on the register longest should take the property. So that was the compromise that's been proposed in terms of allocation, in terms of prioritisation. I would like you to draw your attention to page 149 of the report, looking at paragraph 109, because whilst we get some national prioritisations that we have to give reasonable preference to, there are local adaptations of that, additions to that, if you want to add people in. So you could have young adults in there or essential workers as other reasonable preference cases. So I would like to take views today on if there are any other areas that we think we might have missed off today. We also looked at a review of the transfer process, but the general consensus was that the transfer process is working well. So it's a complicated paper. You probably need to just take all the bits and pieces off it to make sense of it. But generally, the final documentation that's set out at both Appendix C, which is the eligibility, and Appendix F, which is the prioritisation, reflects the community feedback with the exceptions that I've set out above. So the recommendation is on page 135 of the application pack. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Nicola, for a very comprehensive description of the paper. Councillor Dean, please.
Yeah, thank you very much. Well, first, a massive thanks to Nicola and Rachel and all the members that were involved in getting to this stage, and also a big thank you to all the people that took part in the consultation. It has been a momentous effort to get to this, and I'm sure it's not perfect, but it's a lot better than we had, in my view. And yeah, we are where we are, and it's just. And recommendation 3 is that we review this annually, which should be an awful lot better than the review we've just done, which was after 12 years or whatever it was. So that's key to remember. Yeah, and the report I think is absolutely fantastic the way it's set out, because it was a massively complicated issue to look at when you had the existing policy, the consultation results, and the proposed bit here, and just trying to match them all together. So what absolutely brilliant report. So well done. And well, we'll come back to recommending the recommendations, but I'll let everyone else speak now. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Councillor Grottick, please.
Thank you, Chair. Well, as the Director has said, we have spent many hours discussing this very controversial issue. And I dare say, if the Chair allowed, we could stay here and we'd still be talking at breakfast time tomorrow. So with respect, I would suggest that we need to start somewhere. As Councillor Dean has said, many of us will have some reservations about some aspects of this particular revised policy, but it has been given to us after careful thought and after trying to reflect the wishes of the community, although obviously we can't please everybody all of the time. So I would just suggest that the best thing to do is actually to bite the bullet, approve this particular policy, and as recommendation 3 said, review it annually. But even before we have the annual review, to take a very careful monitoring role, which I know the Director and her team will do. And we can always bring back to full council anything that is manifestly not behaving in the way that we think it would. In other words, if we have a real stressor point, then we can bring it back to full council. So given that I believe the lead member for housing has suggested that he approves the recommendation, I'm happy to second it when everyone has had a chance to comment. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Councillor Peacock, please.
Yeah, I'm just slightly concerned with question 12 and unintended consequences. So I'm just going to put forward a really, really quick scenario. So we have an elderly couple living in a house, and one of that couple, for example, gets dementia that they don't know about. They could then, for example, be seen to be abusive, stroke, and be in this unacceptable behaviour bracket until they get treatment. So I just think, is there any point in it, or for example, someone with some sort of mental health issues that could be deemed on a particular day to be unacceptable behaviour, they get treatment, are they then excluded from the register? Because I'm really concerned about its unintentional consequence in that example, or areas around, for example.
So I think what you're talking about there is a medical condition. So we would take it in the round. We don't take each element in isolation. You're talking about a medical condition that would need to be taken into account in the assessment. So nobody's a robot here. This is about, you put all those factors together and that gives you the answer. It's not about one element in isolation. So I think in this situation that you're describing, there would be a medical reason for it and that would then override.
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure that that is in the document as read, because I don't see it at the minute.
Thank you very much. Councillor Williams, please.
Yeah, I broadly agree with everything that's been said. I hope the public see that when they contribute, we listen. Nicola, you drew attention to foster carers, and I'll swim against the tide of the community and say I think we should, as a council, give priority to foster carers and put that on the record.
Thank you. Councillor Sims, please.
Yeah, I would echo Tim's comment. It's a pretty impressive piece of work, this, and it is pretty understandable. And I don't think Councillor Dean did propose it, but you seconded it, so I'm happy to propose it, or the other way around, whatever it is. I think if we didn't do this, then if we didn't put this through, then where would we be? We just have to go through the whole process again, and so absolutely, and I absolutely don't want to go through that process again. It was quite torturous and a lot of conversations, and it's going to be reviewed in a year, which I think is the way forward. So I'm happy to propose or second the recommendations.
Thank you very much. I think, Councillor Dean, you were actually going to propose it when everyone else had spoken. So we'll take your proposal and Councillor Grottick seconding. All those in favour, please, of the recommendations. That's carried unanimous. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you, Rachel.
And thank you, Rachel and Nicola, for the work involved. So, yeah, I think we're all right for a minute.
Do one more and then.
Yeah. So we'll move on now to item 13 on the agenda, complaint handling failure notice. In your hands again, Nicola, please.
Okay, so I like to bring you good news and sometimes I have to bring you bad news. In this case, we've had what's called a handling failure notice from the Housing Ombudsman. This relates to a process. It's not about the way we've dealt with the tenant. It's about the fact that the Ombudsman brought in a new process that we had to follow. And there are a number of failings that were identified within the submission we made and then the correspondence that went backwards and forwards between the housing team and the Ombudsman, or not, as the case may be, because some of the points of contact were not returned. So in this instance, we have to put our hands up and say we did something wrong. We could have argued against it, but there were reasons why things went wrong, but things did go wrong. To put it right, we brought the report to you at last meeting around our lessons learned from our feedback from the customer. We've also updated the feedback policy at the last meeting, so that included the code, the appropriate code for Housing Ombudsman in terms of how many days we respond to complaints from housing within it. So we've put all those things right. This is the final piece of the jigsaw, it is to bring this to your attention. We've got the next item is the further updates on that feedback policy, but this is really about lessons learnt. I could give you all the excuses in the world of why it went wrong. It's down to resources, it's down to time, and it's down to holidays. It's all sorts of things. But we've put processes in place now, which means we tag emails, we make sure we know where they are in terms of actions. So it shouldn't happen again, but it has happened. Put our hands up, say we've got it wrong, make sure we learn the lessons, and that's the approach we're taking. So we haven't flogged the staff, we've just said we need to learn from it. Don't do it again. It is a new process. It was the first year it was implemented. They've got the dates in the diaries for the next round of feedback, and they'll be starting on that work much earlier this year and making sure it's spot on before those deadlines are broken. So lessons learned, apologies for that, but it just wanted to bring it to your attention today. Recommendation is to note the complaint handling failure notice and the lessons learned that we've had from it.
Thank you. Councillor Dean, please.
Yeah, I think my parents would have said they're not angry, they're just disappointed. But yeah, mistakes happen, and they did. But hopefully we'll learn a lesson from it, and that bit in the report that says about lessons learned, I think that's the important bit to look at. So I will propose the recommendation.
Thank you. Councillor Peacock, please.
Just going to second Councillor Dean's recommendation.
Thank you. Councillor Grottick.
I'd just like to say I do understand that it is process, but I would like an assurance that the director has given proper attention, as I'm sure she has, to performance management, because it is very disappointing when you've actually got a complaint in process and you think, oh, help, that actually the a request was made for the housing service to call back by close of play on the 29th of April, and the housing service failed to call back, which is really a fairly basic and fundamental error that I would hope to be reassured is actually going to be addressed. I don't wish to be unkind, but that was really disappointing, Because you would think when the housing ombudsman was actually in the frame, you'd think, well, hang on a minute here, I better be a bit more careful. So I'd just like that reassurance, please, that you have looked very carefully at how that happened and that it won't happen again. Thank you.
We have, and it's the one brick thick line, isn't it? We have 1.22 members of staff dealing with housing. And if someone's on holiday, things are going to slip. So it's just the capacity within the team. It's not acceptable. They know that, and we're monitoring it more carefully now.
Thank you.
Thank you. So I have a proposer and seconder for the recommendation. All those in favour, please. It's carried. Thank you very much. Now, in view of the time and possible chorusy situation, we do need to move on to part 3 and deal with the item number 16 in part 3. I would like a proposer and a seconder, please, that under section 100A, number 4 of the Local Government Act 1972, the public be excluded from the meeting for the following item of business on the grounds that it involves the likely disclosure of exempt information as defined in paragraph 3 of part 1 of schedule 12A, being information about the business affairs of particular persons. So could I have a proposer, please? Councillor Peacock, seconded Councillor Guy. All those in favour? It's carried. Thank you very much. So we'll now move into part 3 and 2 councillors will exit for a moment.
Okay.
Resume in part 1. And our next item on the agenda is item 14, providing feedback policy update, which is again in your hands, Nicola. You're a busy lady tonight.
Thank you. Just a really quick one. Because we reviewed the policy at the last meeting, in reviewing it, it became apparent that some of the roles and descriptions of roles in the policy were out of date. So I hadn't got authority to change that at the last meeting. So what I've taken the opportunity to do at this meeting is to bring a revised policy back to you with the corrections and the correct role titles now within the existing policy. So we're proposing to update the policy just to make sure it reflects the current council roles and structures. So very simple changes, but it's really about titles on within the policy itself. So the old policy set out policy Appendix A, and Appendix B is the updated policy. Takes on board the comments approved by council at the last meeting in relation to the Social Housing Ombudsman's code of practice and the update in the roles and service structures. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Sims, please.
I'm happy to propose this. I quite like on page 243 complaints about the complaints procedure. Surely we could have made that gone into hundreds and hundreds of pages there, couldn't we? But yeah, I'm happy to propose it. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Dean, please.
Yeah, I was quite pleased to see there's a section about receiving compliments. Which I don't know if it's ever happened, but I've got one question. There's nothing in here about complaints against the chief executive. There's only about the role of the chief executive as a backup to the head of policy, communications, democratic services. So is there a policy for complaints? I'm not suggesting anyone's going to complain about it, Russell. We're just
there is a separate process. I'm looking towards Leah's help here, but there's a separate process if we have complaints about chief executive, I think.
So there's a separate policy.
Sorry, I'm having a fit of hay fever. Yes, there is a separate process in terms of, obviously within the complaints policy, the chief executive is being the head of paid service. Everything falls back up to him as the...
Oh, we can't hear you very well, Leah. I'm sorry.
I think she just said there
Oh,
was...
sorry, I didn't have my microphone down. I do apologise.
No problem. Thank you.
Yeah, so complaints against the chief executive aren't covered in the council standards complaints policy. So within the complaints policy, that's before members. That just details how members of the public can make complaints about service provision, both under stage 1 and stage 2. If there are complaints made about the chief executive, then that would be dealt with under a separate process, and obviously wouldn't follow the procedure set out in the policy before you, because everything falls back to the chief executive as head of paid service within that policy, which would be completely inappropriate.
That's great. Thanks, Leah. I'll second the proposal then.
Okay, thank you very much. So we have a proposer and seconder to approve the recommendation. All those in favour? That's carried. Thank you very much indeed. Now we move on to our last item now, item 15, which is the Highway Maintenance Manual and Assessment Management Policy. Again, in your hands, Nicola.
It's a marathon tonight. Okay, so this is about getting it right, I suppose, isn't it? We've got to continue to review our policies and procedures, and the area we've looked at here is around the highway service. So it's really important these two documents that are set out, Appendix A and B, need to be implemented in order to meet best practice guidance and ensure that we meet our statutory duties as a highway authority that are set out under the Highways Act 1980. So the asset management sort of sets the high level context, and the maintenance plans then details how we manage those assets. This has been drawn up with the help of an external consultant, but also with the highways team. So we've got the theory and we needed to put that with the practice. So the Highway Maintenance Manual sets out how we're going to manage and risk assess the maintenance of the highway. It looks at best practice, but it also thinks about what resources we have available to us. So you can try and go for gold plated, but if you haven't got the resources or the money or the team to do it, you can't do that. And this allows us to adapt the offer, the action plan, if you like, to the resources that we have. It does identify areas where further work's required, and you'll see at Appendix C there's a code of practice. And actually, we were pretty good. We met 23 out of the 36 recommendations already, but there's 13 more to work on. So that'll form part of the action plan and the service plan as we move forward, if this is agreed tonight. The maintenance manual and the asset management plan gives an inventory of the assets that we have. And it also, the maintenance manual sets out the level of service and maintenance that we're going to propose. And it allows us to identify the frequency of our inspections and the conditions, the frequency of the conditions assessments that we need to take. So it allows us to then set those service standards. And it also covers things like winter maintenance that we wouldn't normally think about, because we're not really thinking a lot about snow here, but we do have to have it covered in a plan. And so it'll inform our work plans moving forward. So that's the maintenance manual in a nutshell. The asset management policy is exactly what it says on the tin. It's about how we're going to manage the asset at a higher level. But it also lets us think about the lifetime cost. So if we're putting a new road in, like we did in 2014, you know that you've got a lifetime cost that we can calculate. And in doing so, it allows us to then set realistic budgets. So we've just looked at the budget setting for the year and realised that actually, if you looked at highway maintenance, we never get it right. So we need to then look at our plans, and these plans give us the framework for then setting the budget to make sure we get it right from here on as we move forward. So it helped us prioritise the work of the team, and it also helps us prioritise the assets depending on the importance of the asset. I think what it does highlight, and the conditions survey that's attached, I think, at Appendix D, is that the roads are in pretty good condition. The footpaths need to have some more focus. So we need to think about, as we move forward and do our capital investment programme moving forward, how we're going to address that. And that'll be part of our budget setting as we move forward next year. And we'll look at a 3 to 5 year plan around how we're going to bring those assets up to the right standard. We'll also look at things like active travel to see if there's other grants and funds that we'll be able to support us in our work. The recommendations are set out on page 257. That we approve and adopt the Highway Maintenance Manual and approve and adopt the Highway Asset Management Policy. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much, Nicola. Councillor Dean, please. Councillor Sims first.
Yes, thank you, Nicola. I can see why we have to have this, but I would say actually that, I mean, a couple of times, well, 3 or 4 times a year, I'll bring up with Eddie and say that there's some issue somewhere. And generally it's done before and done the next bus. They are extremely good. And And I get lots and lots of comments from people on the bus about how amazing our roads here are. I think you should have come here 15 years ago. But yeah, so yeah, I think that it's good to have this. You have to have it, but I think even without it, I think they're all on top. They're on top of it anyway. So I'm very happy to propose a recommendation.
No, yeah. So I think it's an important point. So the reactive stuff is good, but actually the point is if you do a program of repairs and a routine maintenance program, you wouldn't have to do the reactive stuff because you'd already have done it before it becomes a critical issue. So you can plan ahead. So the idea in the ideal world is to reduce the amount of reactive work as much as you possibly can. You'll never get it to zero. The idea is if you can get into a more cyclical arrangement, then you should reduce the amount of reactive work in the long term.
And what I'm specifically got in mind is just that at the end of the top of the road here, there's a railing there, and I rang up and he said it was a bit wobbly. 2 days later, no, it's no longer wobbly, and they painted it. This is what I mean, really.
Thank you. Councillor Dean, please.
I was just going to say, well, I've got a question, but not an awful lot of work for very few roads. But anyway, just disproportionate in my mind. But anyway, but on page 276, it says a report can be brought to members in February's budget setting meeting. It's too late then, so we would need a report before then, in September probably, when we start the budget setting process. But I'll second the recommendation.
Thank you. Councillor Guy, please.
Yes, Chair, it's nothing too serious, just page 6. Have we got 80 streetlights?
It says it has, then that's what's been counted, yes.
Right.
Why?
Thank you. So we have a proposer and second of the recommendation. Can I please have your vote on approving recommendation? That's carried. Thank you very much indeed. And I just would like to say from the chair here on this, this is actually a prime example of where our officers have actually are looking after us and looking after the community, because we've had a couple of occasions tonight at this meeting where things have not actually gone terribly well and we've had to point them out and so on. Legislation has changed so much in the last few years that if we hadn't done this, if we hadn't got this report, if we hadn't had this in front of you and had it voted on tonight, we could have left ourselves open to serious challenge and problems down the road if anything happened. So this has been picked up by our officers. They've run with it. They've done a very comprehensive report. So I think we need to be very grateful that this hasn't come because somebody's pointed it out. It's come because they've been proactive in trying to make sure that this council is looked after properly. So thank you very much to Russell, Nicola and everybody else involved. And on that note, I will close the meeting. Thank you very much indeed.